Hey everyone, thank you for joining us for today's webinar presented by Cosvox. It's a beautiful Thursday here on the East Coast in the US, and we're grateful to see so many people joining us for today's presentation. My name is Noah Barnett, and I run marketing here at Cosvox. Prior to joining Cosvox, I actually spent 6 years doing fundraising and marketing for humanitarian nonprofits, really focusing on how do we grow our impact, both in acquiring supporters, cultivating them, and just retaining them. And I was actually part of some of the original customers of Cosvox back in the day. We used Cosvox for 5 years, and we loved the way that the fundraising tools really empowered us to connect with our audiences. We're also joined today by Rob Wu, who's the CEO and co-founder of Cosvox. Hey, Rob.
Hey Noah, it's great to be here on this webinar. Hi, my name is Rob Wu. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cosvox. Ever since we started Cosvox from an inspiration behind fundraising for our own volunteer trips, we've seen it grow and serve thousands of nonprofits all over the world. So I'm really excited just to share with you some of the experiences that I've had working with nonprofits that are our customers, as well as being on boards of nonprofits and starting nonprofits, and how you can really take some fundraising best practices back to your organization. Thanks so much.
Yeah, and Rob's going to be joining us towards the end of the presentation to just share more about how you can really take what you learned today and implement it in an active fundraising campaign, and how Cosvox's fundraising tools can really come alongside you to do that. So throughout the presentation today, if you want to share any of your learnings, feel free to tag us at Cosvox on Twitter or hashtag NPLearning. Here's a little quick overview of what we're going to run through. Again, it's going to be about 30 minutes of presentation. I know when I'm on the other side of this, I don't really want to spend too much longer than that. So we've tried to condense the material down as much as possible and make sure that we're only sharing the core nuggets. But we're going to go over, fundraising in today's connected world. It's a distraction-filled world, and it's really making the job of a fundraiser, you all on this webinar, quite difficult. And so we're going to unpack that a little bit. Then we're going to share 3 steps that we believe you must take to run a successful campaign. Then we have some free resources for you, and then we're going to do that live Q&A right around 1 p.m. Eastern time. And then Rob's going to join us at the end for anyone who wants to stick around and kind of show you how to implement some of these best practices using Cosvox's fundraising tools. So again, we talked a lot about Cosvox already, but really with Cosvox's online fundraising tools, you can easily create, design, and manage your fundraising campaigns without more staff or increasing your budget. It's a key component that we hear over and over and over again from small and medium-sized fundraising teams is we can't add more staff, we can't increase our budget, but we need to raise more money, we need to reach more donors, and Cosvox's online fundraising tools really come alongside you to help you do that. It's really perfect for any type of fundraising campaign. And again, Rob's going to kind of dig into this further at the end of our presentation. So all of you are here on this presentation listening to me talk for one reason. Really, it's just the world you fundraise in has changed. And not just changed, but the world you fundraise in is rapidly changing all the time. It's a very difficult ecosystem to fundraise in. And so what we've really figured out and learned over the years is that there's specific ways that you should run your campaigns and prioritize things in this new ecosystem where we're always connected. It's really difficult to stand out, and people buy and donate and travel and all sorts of different things in new and different ways in today's world. Think 10 years ago or 15 years ago, social media really didn't even exist. And digital connectivity wasn't at the adoption rate that it is today. And so we really need to, this new ecosystem really requires you to rethink how you go about fundraising. But the good news is before this shift, the priority or the advantage was whoever could rent the most attention. So whoever had the biggest budget and the biggest reach, those nonprofits that grew rapidly over the past 30, 40 years to being multi-million, almost billion-dollar organizations, simply because they had more money and bigger reach, and really they could buy and rent attention. In today's digital ecosystem, some of the advantages or the friction points that required budget and reach in the previous ecosystem have gone away. And now what we see is that the key to fundraising today online is about building relationships. And so we're really returning to the core of fundraising. which is about a group of people coming together to advocate for a specific change that they want to see in the world. And it requires you to build trust and loyalty. And we think this is a huge opportunity for nonprofits, especially small and medium sized fundraising teams, because you have the advantage now, because the big organizations were designed to capitalize on this reach and budget, reach and budget, reach and budget. Those are still important, but they can't necessarily take the care that it requires to build deep relationships and also gain trust and loyalty. So this is a great quote that I love bringing up is some organizations will thrive from this increased chaos, some will be unprepared, and some will merely fight it and lose. And we want to help you be an organization that thrives in this new ecosystem that we are living in. And so we feel like there's really three things that you can do to run any sort of fundraising campaign. But we're going to talk about these because these aren't new. Crafting a plan, creating a clear and compelling appeal, and promoting your campaign are not new steps, but rather how you approach that in today's new ecosystem is slightly different. And so we're going to share some of those insights with you today. So the first thing is that we believe you really need to set clear campaign objectives. This is more important than ever. You can't just simply go out and say, I have this cause, give us money because it's worthwhile. You really have to give clear objectives. People have more information than they've ever had before. And so they don't really just accept, hey, we're helping to save the whales, or hey, we're helping to feed children in poverty. Can you help us? They want to know more. Because of this connected world we live in, they have access to so much more information. And thus, when you communicate your fundraising campaigns to your audience, you have to give them more to grab a hold of than just give to us because we're fighting for a worthy cause. So how do you go about doing that? So we're going to kind of dig into this Boys and Girls Club's case and talk about how they did it. But we're also going to talk about a few other approaches that you can take in setting campaigns. So the key here is that you really want to set SMART goals. And this is probably something that you've been hearing since you got into fundraising or got into marketing. But the challenge we see is that even though nonprofits and organizations know that they should set SMART goals, they barely ever do it. So they get very caught up. Fundraisers get caught up, and maybe you're in this right now, or your executive director or your board is pushing down your throat. We just need to fundraise. We just need to fundraise. You really need to step back and set SMART goals for each of your campaigns. And so we feel like that's the foundational step. And so when we say SMART goals, we're really talking about specific. Raise $5,000 increase program to serve 100 additional at-risk youth. This is a very specific goal. Again, you're going to come up with those tangible handles that someone can really take hold of when you communicate this message. It's measurable. Measure the campaign by counting donations. What does success look like to you? That might be dollars raised. That might be new donors. That might be advocates. That just might be reach. It's up to you to really decide that. But you need to set that out on the front end so that when you're running your campaign, you're very clear across your entire team what the goal is and what success looks like. The other one is attainable because we know that most donors give $50 per donation. We believe we can reach 100 donors during this campaign. Again, relevant. This programming, it has to be something relevant. It can't just be, hey, we want to raise $5,000 to help 100 people because, we just came up with that. People don't buy into that anymore. They want it to be relevant and real and worthy. And so you really need to make sure that you're communicating that as you set goals. The other thing that we believe is important is kind of a time-based goal. Like, when are you going to accomplish this? When are you going to evaluate whether you were successful or not? And so that's what we mean by time-based. So SMART goals are super important as a foundational way before you set up your fundraising goal or your fundraising campaign. So we feel like there's three ways you can really set your goals. One is using prior campaigns. So what have you done in the past? How do you want to increase that? How do you want to improve? The other is outside examples. So maybe there's organizations that are similar to yours, or other community-based organizations or other international organizations that kind of have set benchmarks that you can kind of play against. The other thing is cost of impact, which I personally think this is the most effective because it is the most raw and kind of is the goal that has the most integrity. If you want to help 100 kids because that's how many kids in a community that you have access to help, just communicate what the cost of that impact is. Just tell people what you need to do to accomplish what opportunity is in front of your organization. So that might be raising money for a new building. That might be increasing your budget so that you can serve more meals you can open up more service times for your community centers. You can rescue more animals, or you can expand. Maybe you've only been helping in a certain area of the world, and maybe you want to expand to a new country. What does that look like? Tell that story, and that's where cost of impact really comes into play. So the second step of really creating a successful campaign is writing an appeal that resonates. And the reason that you can't just write an appeal, similar to what we said in the last step, it has to resonate. And what resonate really means is that someone needs to be able to grab a hold of it and then share it with somebody else. And so if they hear your campaign, they hear your appeal, they should be able to process it, connect with it, and then be able to tell that story to someone else. There's a great professor at the Wharton Business School in Pennsylvania that talks about this idea of like building a story that's designed to be shared. And so a lot of times fundraising appeals, especially in the previous ecosystem, were direct appeals, like direct mail or direct response. Maybe you're familiar with that, where the goal was simply, we're going to tell as many people as possible this message, and we're going to ask them to give. And we know that 3 to 5% are going to give, and that makes it worth it. And so that was the game you play in like the direct response world, is like, we're going to say something and the appeal is going to drive them to give or take an action. Now you have to really write an appeal that resonates in a way that they can take that appeal, maybe respond to it, but also pass it on. And that's where you can tap into this world, because as we live in more higher increased distractions, we're starting to tune out all the noise. But the things that we see that people aren't tuning out are two things. One is appeals that really go to their head, and the other is appeals that go to their heart. So one is that, the head is kind of like a conceptual appeal that really connects with them in a way that makes sense. It's something they care about. We also take this one step further, is that as noise increases, we start tuning out everything that's not the people that we care about the most or that have the most value to us. So that's friends, family, community, maybe brands that you feel loyal to because they add value. And so how does your organization create an appeal that does that? The other thing is an appeal to the heart. And this really is something, again, that comes back to that idea of resonating, is you need to tell a story that is designed to be shared with others. So the reason we express so much importance around stories is really what connects us. The causes that you all are fighting for and advocating for matter because there's stories behind that. There's stories of hurt. There's stories of hope. There's transformation stories. There's things that are happening. And what's interesting is when I talk to fundraisers, they know this. That's why they're in this business, is because a story captivated them and resonated with them. And so I think what we need to do as fundraisers now is not necessarily just appeal to somebody, but rather tell the story. And so I love this example where they say, meet Anna, one of the future field coordinators of the reusable sanitary pad project. And so they told this story about Anna, and it's someone that you could think about. Maybe this is your sister, maybe this is your neighbor. It makes it much easier to connect with. It also makes it easier to share with others, because now I can just tell you Anna's story. It aligns with a lot of the other stories that we all tell on maybe Friday nights or at the breakfast table with our friends, or when we're at lunch with our colleagues. We tell those types of stories. And so stories are really what connects us. So what we talk about in stories is that you want to put a face behind your campaign that supporters can really connect with. You also want to draw your supporters in and emotionally connect with your cause. A lot of this is repetitive, but it's so important. And you really want to show the donor how they fit into the story. And so by designing a story where you're telling a need, there's some sort of conflict, and you're inviting your supporters, your audience, to come alongside that person in conflict and almost be the hero. And so we talk a lot about how can you make your supporters feel as though they can be the hero in the story. A lot of nonprofits that we engage with tell stories as though like the nonprofit is Superman. And maybe that's true. Maybe your supporters, are just funding the bill, and you as a nonprofit are really the ones like sweating and getting down in the weeds and doing the dirty work. And so it's easy for us to then translate that back to our supporters in a way that makes them feel as though they're just the bank, we're the heroes. And that just doesn't work. That's not how we connect. We don't feel necessary, and so we withdraw from that. But if you really show the donor how they fit into the story, you'll drive much more successful results. Here's a great example about the migrant crisis and just how you can really intervene for refugees in need. The organization is the platform at which the story is being told, but the reader, the audience, the people that they sent this to are the ones that can be the hero in the story. And by creating a giant gap that says, fill me, people are respond. That's human nature. And so those are the types of stories that you want to tell. I'll be sharing this presentation with you afterwards so you can dig into all these examples in much more detail and see how you can pull some insights for you as you write your own stories. So the last section we're going to talk about is really on how you can promote your campaign. So it's great. We have clear goals, we have clear objectives, we know what we want to do. We want to raise $5,000 to help 100 new kids this month gain access to educational resources. That's something compelling. We've pulled out our story that's going to be kind of our advocate. Jacob is a little boy that lives in our community that grew up in poverty, but strives to learn, strives to seek educational opportunities. And so we're going to use Jacob as our kind of capstone story to promote and represent and really be an advocate and an ambassador for the other 99 kids that we're going to help through the success of this campaign. However, if you stop there, no one's going to hear your campaign. So it's great to prepare clear goals. It's great to craft a compelling story, get all your things in alignment. Tell Jacob's story, interview Jacob, maybe do video, maybe do social media posts, maybe do photos of Jacob. But at the end of the day, if you don't promote your campaign in an effective way, no one's going to care because no one knows. And so I'm going to spend the bulk of the rest of our presentation really diving into how do you promote your campaign in today's hyper-connected, distraction-filled world. So we see that, again, effective promotion requires a few different things. One is an emotional story, clear impact, an urgent need. Even if your need is not urgent by design, you can express it in a way that's still urgent. Maybe that's just in the sense of, we're going to try to help 100 kids by the end of the month. That's still creating urgency, even though we could help those kids in June, but we want to help them in May. And so even if the impact you're trying to have doesn't innately have urgency, like help refugees because they're dying today, like that's clear urgency, but rather creating urgency in your appeal is really important. Again, specific asks. What do you want me to do? How can I step in? Show me different ways, and not just specific ask, meaning give us $100, give us $100, give us $100, but rather how can I uniquely, as a business professional, as someone that has a family, as someone that's well connected in the community, how can I be a part of this story? What are the asks? What are the things that I can do to really help drive change in this story? Maybe that's giving, maybe that's sharing, maybe that's being an advocate and fundraising on the behalf, leveraging my social capital. All these things are really important in effective promotion. And again, campaign consistency. This is another one I think a lot of organizations struggle with, is they feel like they need to change things all the time. So maybe it's a new campaign story, or maybe it's a new name, and maybe it's like, the last campaign failed, so let's start over. But what we don't realize is every time we change something, your audience's minds have to reevaluate whether that's something they should care about. And so keeping consistency across your campaigns, even when you run campaigns, and increasing it and setting that consistency is really important. Along with when you're messaging your campaign, you're consistently telling a solid story, whether that's online, whether that's in person, whether that's through your development reps, whether that's on a billboard, whether it's in video. It's always the same story. And again, multi-channel is the most effective. So I'm going to cover a few channels that we think are more important in today's ecosystem. And then we'll kind of dive into a summary and you'll be able to ask questions. Hang in there with me. This is the meat of the presentation. I think this is where you'll actually be able to see the most success in your next campaign. So if you haven't been listening so far, this is where the key is. So the first one we're going to talk about is email marketing. It's more powerful than you think. In 2015, organizations reported a 3,800% ROI on email marketing programs. 3,800% could mean anything, but I think the point here is that the value of email marketing is so significant, and it's something that you cannot ignore. So there's 4 components of a successful emails. The first one is targeting. The second one is your subject line. And third is content. And then fourth is call to action. We're going to dive into each of these briefly. So email targeting. When sending out targeted emails, customize the message based on what appeals to your donor. So segmentation is something that you can leverage to be able to drive more success in your campaigns. So instead of sending the same email message to all your supporters, regardless of their relationship with you, whether they are a first time donor or a loyal donor or a recurring kind of sustainer giver, just send out the same message. But if you really take the time to segment your groups, understand your audiences, what they care about, maybe what they gave to previously, and communicate to them in a way that starts where they are and bridges them back to where you are and where you want them to be with your campaign. So email targeting is huge. The second is subject line. So subject line is something that is overlooked, but it's super important because I've been on teams where we rewrite and write and edit an email, a fundraising email, for days, months, weeks, crazy amounts of time, crazy amount of people resources. And then we say, okay, send this out. And we just let the email marketer in the corner or the intern that maybe is helping you send this out choose what the subject line is. But what we miss is that the subject line is the front door, the invitation into the content. And so if someone doesn't open your emails, and again, we're living in a different world, it's distraction filled. Before, every time you got an email, you opened it and read it. I've received 56 emails already this morning. I've probably read 3 of them, and the other ones I'm just going to delete because they don't matter to me anymore because I'm filtering naturally. And so I'm not opening all of the emails. And so your subject line has to be compelling and it has to invite me in and already brief me and pique my interest in a way that I want to read more. I want to know what's going on. A few other things that you can do to really make that effective. Keeping it short, not overusing capital letters, personalizing with the donor's name, and even just sending it from a real person and an individual. People are more likely to open emails from a person rather than your brand or your organization. Again, the email contact, our content is using motion evoking text and images. This is something I know a lot of people have a handle on, but really kind of focusing on how is this story leaving room for my supporter to feel like the hero. And then the call to action is, being very clear what you want and direct about what you want them to do. Stand out on the page, cause your audience to want to act immediately. You already earned their attention. You already told them a story. Don't leave it don't leave them to have to guess what they should do now. You have their attention. You've worked so hard to earn it. Make sure you clearly tell them what you want them to do. And again, this goes back to segmentation, where if you segment properly, you can customize the ask to the audience so you know that they're equipped to take that action. The second one we're going to talk about is social media. How do you tap into your supporters' networks? So a lot of your supporters' social capital is actually worth more than their financial capital. And so how do you really unlock that? A lot has changed in the past 15 years. None of these things existed 15 years ago. And so more than half of social media users discover social initiatives via social media platforms. So that means they're discovering your cause, maybe not your cause, because maybe you're not on social media, you're not using it well to promote your campaigns, but they are discovering what new things they should care about. And usually that's through the recommendations of their friends, family, and community. 64% of social media users surveyed gave $100 or more to nonprofits in the last year. And so this isn't just an advocacy engagement platform. This is how people find out what they should invest their time, money, and effort into. And so you really have to, again, stand out, be compelling, and not even necessarily focus so much on your organization's reach, but rather the reach that you can tap into, again, by telling a story that's worth being shared. Design your social media in a way that someone wants to share it. So if I'm saying, give to our campaign, I'm not going to share that. That's not worth sharing. That's not worth telling my friends about. But if you give them a story, if you give them a creative image like the SBCA did, they knew that this would get passed on. And so designing how you use and distribute your campaign through social media is more important to think about how you can design it so that it's shareable. Again, stories connect us. Stories are something that we share. And again, it's something that, social media is designed for us to share moments of our lives. So you as an organization can leverage that same medium to share stories about the impact that is going on because of your supporters. And people are more likely to share that, especially when it's accompanied by a cute little photo like this. Videos are great, but again, it's designing something that's worth sharing. 56% of social media users said that compelling storytelling is what motivated them to make a donation. Here's a few more examples that you can dive into um, after the presentation. I'll send this whole presentation to you and the recording at the end. And again, I know we're blowing through this and there's so much important things here. If you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to share those in the questions pane, and we'll dive into those in just probably 10 or 15 minutes as we finish up. So the last area that we think is crucial, and we're kind of biased here because we've been digging in on this for about 7 years now, like Rob said, but we feel like peer-to-peer fundraising is the key to the future. And not because it's new, not because it's the shiny new object, but rather because it really goes back to the integrity of what fundraising was all about to begin with. It was gathering people together to work on a cause and a change in the world that they wanted to see happen. And what built that, what strengthened that was relationships. And so we feel like peer to peer fundraising is not necessarily new or different, but it's really tapping into the key of what fundraising was all about and advocacy was all about. Now, though, we live in a new ecosystem where it's even more important. And because of the digital connectivity that we have, it becomes even more valuable to your organization to reimagine and tap back into. 85% of donors preferred being asked by friends and family to make a donation than your brand. So you can ask as many times as you want, and still the person you're talking to would probably be more likely to give to something their friend asked them to give to. That's crazy when you think about it. Because again, like in the direct response world, that gives us, a little margin. And that's all we care about because we're capitalizing on budget and reach. In today's day and age, it's so much harder to reach people that once you reach them, you only have a few minutes, or not even a few minutes, but a very short period of time to really connect with them. And so, what better way as an organization, as a fundraiser, to spend more time or less time shouting into the distance for no one to hear you, and more time empowering your supporters to be the voice and the megaphone for your campaign. And that's what we think is a fundamental shift for a fundraiser today. And that's what we try to do. That's what I invest all my time in, is advocating and educating people that have maybe been in the business for 1 year or maybe 25 years, really understand the opportunity that exists in the new ecosystem that we're living. So this is a great campaign by the Motherhood Collective. It's a maternal health, kind of women's health advocacy organization. So they did a lot of, they never did fundraising before, but what they saw was there was an opportunity for them to tap into their volunteer network and equip them with the tools and empower them to use their social influence, not necessarily, new moms don't necessarily have a bunch of capital to give, but they have huge influence, huge social networks. And so instead of just asking for money, they said, hey, we really want you to come alongside us and help us reach new people. And so they equipped and empowered their supporters to basically be the voice for this entire campaign called Maternal Health Matters. And they raised almost $10,000 this year or last year. And this year they're finishing up their campaign. I think they're right at $13 or $14, $15,000. So again, that consistency, bringing it back, was something they could really capitalize on. This just shows you that they were able to kind of equip 23 of their supporters, volunteers, to be able to start advocating. And they were able to reach over 100 donors for their organization, which is bigger than the money raised. For them, their goal was to focus on increasing their reach and donor base. And so what they really wanted to do was not necessarily just raise money, but rather reach new donors. And they were able to do that through this campaign. Here's Alicia, who actually watched my kids back in the day. But she was able to kind of say, hey, like, I'm doing this. I'm a mom. I've benefited from this. I've seen the value. I've seen how this organization really helps. Come alongside me. She told her story and was able to get her friends and family, 7 people, to donate to her campaign. So there's a bunch of other, let me step back a little bit. So what the Motherhood Collective was able to do was to really capitalize on the attention they had from their key supporters. So when they said, how do we raise more money this year? That was the question they asked. They didn't just approach it and say, okay, we need to do another event. We need to do a gala. We need to do a race. We need to do this. We need to do that. They said, wait a second, what assets do we have as an organization? Who cares about us? And they uncovered the fact that they had, I think 50 or so volunteers that are dedicated to serving with them every single week. And they said, okay, how do we tap into the influence that those volunteers have in our community? They live in a small community, and so the fact that they could rally their volunteers to share their story on their behalf really increased their reach. And that's what they were able to see with this campaign. So again, as you navigate how to run a successful campaign and you're planning, think about what you're trying to accomplish, and then don't just jump to, okay, we need to run a new campaign, we need to run a new event. Don't go back to your old playbook that just increases reach and requires budget and staff, but rather rethink how you leverage the current assets you have, which a lot of times lies in the key supporters you already have access to, and that will already listen to you, so you don't have to convince them to listen to you. That's what the Motherhood Collective did. And really, I think that's what you as a fundraiser can tap into as well in this new ecosystem that we live in. So there's a bunch of other opportunities for you to be able to promote your campaign. I'm going to skip over them today, but again, when you see the presentation, you can kind of tap into them. These are all secondary. And so until you are doing the first three well, these are just ignore these, but they're definitely great if you really want to kind of capitalize on more channels as you promote your campaign. So the key insight we found over observing more than 60,000 campaigns and really just analyzing and thinking through this new ecosystem that we live in boils down to three things. Fundraisers need to learn how to be more human. We need to really embrace our humanity and remember that we're not some entity, we're not some organization that's just yelling into the abyss and hoping someone hears us. We're a person. We have a story to tell. Our supporters are humans. They have a story to tell. How do we leverage back to the old way of fundraising, which was, again, bringing together a group of people that cared about something, who worked together to make a change in the world that they wanted to see happen? So you have to be human. The second insight is that you need to tell stories worth sharing. Again, it's not about just telling stories or writing appeals. It's not about reach anymore. It's about telling stories worth sharing. You want to tell things that build relationships with individuals, connectivity, and that gives them something to share and tell their friends. I had an organization one time I was helping say, no one's sharing our stuff. Why? I was like, you're not giving them a reason to. You're not giving them a story that's worth sharing. So it's not why are people not sharing? It's what can we provide that would motivate our supporters to share it? And that's the attitude you have. Like, look at your stuff, look at your fundraising appeal, look at your campaign, the previous campaigns. Would you share that if someone send it to you? We work every day on things, and we experience brands and products and marketing every single day. And we know what's good and what's bad. When we have good customer service, we know it's good. And when we have bad customer service, we know it's bad. And we're like, man, I just wish I was treated more like a human. I wish this company talked to me more like a human and not, we value your service. Please hold for another 23 minutes. That's not treating you like a human. But then we go to work and fundraise the same way that we were just treated and we didn't like it. We need to tell stories worth sharing. And the last thing is we think in today's ecosystem, hyper-connected world filled with distractions, brands' influences are declining. You've probably seen this in your Facebook reach. It's declining. More messages are being shared, more messages are being sent, and brands and organizations are spending more and more money to try to rent attention of your supporters. But what doesn't change is people being influenced by their friends, family, and community. So the supporters you already have, how do you empower them to do something? Not just give, but do something. Whether that's share, advocate, fundraise, whatever it is for your organization, you need to focus on that. You need to cultivate an environment that you're empowering your supporters to do something. So I know that was a lot of information, and I know we went over just a little bit on the presentation side, but I wanted to make sure we got through that. So again, there's really three components to running a successful campaign. One is you need to plan well. Two is you need to create an appeal and tell stories that are worth sharing. And three, you need to promote in a new way. So it's not just about reach anymore. It's about how do you really empower and build relationships through trust and loyalty to promote your campaign, because that is much more effective and actually has cumulative advantage for your organization year over year. So you're not starting over every year. You're not running on a treadmill that never stops, but you're rather building up a task force, an army to serve alongside you, which is really just the true essence of fundraising. And so what we're saying is nothing new. We're just saying the ecosystem that we live in today actually makes going back to the roots of fundraising more and more valuable than ever before. So thank you guys for listening. We're going to dive into some Q&A now. And this is where you can really ask questions about anything I said, or maybe things that I didn't address that you think are really important. So let me pull up some of these questions that you guys have asked, and we'll kind of dive into them. So Olivia Collins asks, how long should a campaign last? Is it relative to the amount the campaign aims to raise? So Olivia, I think you kind of almost answered your question yourself. But how long a campaign should really last is quite relative. So it really depends on what the goals are, what you're trying to accomplish. So going back to that planning stage, what are you trying to accomplish by when? And then how do you translate that? Now, there is some benchmarks and best practices. What we see is, campaigns that have shorter time frames, because again, you can rally a lot more people to care for 2-4 weeks rather than saying, okay, we're going to drag this out for 3 months or a whole year. And so I think considering time inside your planning and goals is the key. So it is contextual. It is something that you really have to navigate based on your campaign. So Corinne asks, we've got a limited staff, so I want to focus our time on actions that are proven to work. I'm with you, like our team here at Cosvox is really small. And so every week we actually get together to prioritize what is most important, what's going to drive the most impact, how are we going to serve our mission. Totally get it. I know Rob and I talk about that all the time. How do we work on the things that have the most impact? For me, there's two things that fundraisers do. In an attempt to focus, they cut everything and keep doing the same, or keep doing the things that are working the best. That's one way. The other thing which I think is actually the right way, is to think about the ecosystem we live in and think about the activities, not about what you do today. Discount that for just a minute, and think about the activities that are most valuable to your goals in today's ecosystem. So a lot of what we talked about today, connecting with supporters, building relationships, deepening those relationships. So it's not a quick win game anymore. You can't just run campaigns and expect to just raise tons and tons of money anymore. It takes cumulative buildup. And so spending time on building relationships is important. And so one way that we help with that is, our team created fundraising tools to help you spend less time managing and creating campaigns and more time with your supporters. And so leveraging tools is another way, streamlining your processes, but really evaluating, what activities are going to drive the most value. And what we would see is they're ones that are human. So building relationships, telling stories, and then empowering your supporters to be advocates for your cause instead of you always being the one with the bullhorn. Just looking through some other, how do you avoid over solicitation? Jill, that's a great question. I think it's one, there's always this kind of burnout process or whatever that you have to work through. I think just, again, it goes back to being authentic, being human, not being a factory, not running the direct response playbook. And so all those things are really important as you try to avoid that. And I think, again, if you go back to being human, so only do things that you would want to do upon, or someone to do to you, will help. Second is, tell stories. And so I think you can't tell enough stories. And then third is really just focus on empowering and equipping your supporters and not always just asking. Asking is still important, but being able to do other things that really help facilitate fundraising activities year round is more important, I think, in today's ecosystem. Debbie asks, how long or how frequently is it appropriate to email your list? Again, it's really contextual based on your audience, but what we see is the more times you send email, the more money you raise. So there's research out there that correlates those two things. So I think one thing is to probably communicate more. I think that doesn't mean to always ask people for donations. So it's also figuring out ways to communicate with your supporters and keep your brand and cause top of mind without it always being in the form of an ask. So introducing maybe updates and storytelling. Again, I've never been upset about an organization sending me too many stories about how they're making an impact, and just celebrating the success of my contributions and the organization's goals. So, hey, Jill, yeah, I will be sending out these slides, and then I'll also be sending the recording so you can tap into those resources after the fact or share with your board or executive director or your team. Karen asks, do you find happy versus sad photos are more effective? I really think it depends on the cause and your audience, your target audience. There's a lot of research out there that talks about how certain photos are more effective with certain audience types. So maybe an older generation is more susceptible to certain things, or maybe a female audience is more interested in certain types of communication. I think it again goes back to like, what's the best representation of your brand? What are you trying to communicate? What's the larger story that you're trying to tell, Karen? And then how do those photos actually fit into that? Again, it's about consistency. And so I don't think a photo is going to matter that much if you're only deciding to use a photo because you think someone's going to give. Again, I think it's more about building relationships rather than trying to convince someone or make them feel bad or happy to give to your cause. So it's about building that long-term relationship, building loyalty, building trust. So some organizations go to the flip side and say, okay, we're only going to show impact, celebration. That's what people want to see. That's what people share. I think then you're doing a disservice to your audience because you're not showing the reality of what happens when you don't step up. And you can actually create someone just not to show up, because they think everything's good and dandy. So I think it's your role as kind of the fundraiser to communicate the full integrity of the story, both good and bad. And whether that's through photos that are happy or sad is really up to the context of your organization. Chris, thanks. I think it was awesome too. I appreciate the affirmation. Thanks, Chris. Lauren asks, how does an organization kickstart a peer-to-peer campaign? And is a peer-to-peer campaign effective in an older community with older donors? So, Lauren, I think one of the keys goes back to like figuring out what your goals are. Like if you look at the Motherhood Collective example, they start out with like, how do we raise more money this year? Because they wanted to expand their services to more women. And so they started there and said, okay, we have this campaign that we always do. We can do a few things here. We have all these volunteers. We really want to empower and capitalize on their social influence. So we're going to kind of build a campaign around that. And so a lot of times peer-to-peer campaigns can be run in association with your active campaigns and your fundraising events, but you can also run peer-to-peer fundraising campaigns year round. And so I know a lot of organizations kind of use the summer months to say, hey, like you're out doing activities, you're maybe doing a fun run, or you're going out and being outside and doing some sort of activity. Why not do that as a fundraiser or a representation for this cause? And so you can build year-round peer-to-peer fundraising into your strategy collectively. As far as does peer-to-peer campaigns work well in older communities with older donors, I think if you look at some of the social media adoption rates, baby boomers and up is like one of the highest growing populations on Facebook. And so again, I think with that population, because they're less likely to navigate the complexity of digital and how to share things and how to do all that. And so I think they'll definitely be loyal and a key advocate for you. You just have to be careful to remove as much friction as possible for them to be able to do that. What I mean by that is, we have an organization here that uses CosVox that actually provided copy to send to their friends and family. So, hey, here, email your friends. And maybe with the younger generation, that's all you'd have to say. But with an older generation, you might say, hey, email your friends. Here's a copy and paste this, or forward this email to somebody. Those are the types of activities that you can kind of want to be conscious and aware of. as you navigate the kind of generational differences amongst your audiences. So there's a few more questions that we'll have to get to in another medium. So what I'll do is those that ask questions that we didn't get to is I'll reach back out to you in the next day or two to kind of answer some of those questions. So again, we're going to be sending this presentation. So a lot of the questions that people are asking, review the presentation and the recording, and a lot of the answers are there. There's also a ton more free resources on our blog at cosvox.com/blog. So feel free to go check that out. There's a search bar there. So some of you were asking about how do you make videos or how do you really write a compelling appeal. There's tons of resources there that you can really tap into. That's what I spend most of my days on, is really kind of how do we equip and empower fundraisers to navigate this new world that we're living in. So thanks again to everyone that joined us and for staying a little bit long. For those that are interested, you can launch your next online fundraising campaign for free with CosVox. This really allows you to easily design, launch, and manage your online fundraising campaigns using our powerful online fundraising software. And so the great thing about this is that we have a free 21-day trial. So you can fundraise on our platform for free for 21 days. And all you have to do is pay transaction and CosVox fees, which is a small portion of each donation. But you can test out our platform, explore it, see if it's a good fit for how it can help you streamline your fundraising without more staff and increasing your budget. And so I would definitely invite you to check that out. And what's great is Rob's actually going to rejoin us, and he's going to be walking through a demo of CosVox to show you how you can really implement some of these best practices using our online fundraising tools. So Rob, once Rob gets set up, I'll be switching back over, and he's going to be taking over. Thanks everyone for joining us. And hang out if you want to kind of see a quick demo. It'll probably be 15 minutes or so. We don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I would invite you to kind of stick around and see how you can leverage CosVox to run your online fundraising campaigns this year. Rob?
All right, thanks, Noah. That was an amazing presentation on how you can use different types of storytelling techniques, email techniques for your online fundraising campaign. Really love what you shared over there. For the next 10 to 15 minutes, I just want to take some of the insights that Noah shared and actually apply it to how you can run a fundraising campaign on CosVox. So this is just a CosVox website. One of the things that Noah pointed out was that we have tons of resources. You guys have some amazing questions that you ask. You can always go to cosvox.com, navigate to our resources tab, and under our learning center and our blog, as well as some of the other sections here, but just tons of resources that you can get some of these questions that you're asking answered. All of our resources are always free, so we don't charge for it. So you can always browse our resources and how you can do online fundraising better on cosvox.com. So in terms of showing a few examples, what CosVox is we're a online fundraising platform that you can easily use for small fundraising teams to really activate your supporters, to reach new donors, as well as to raise funds online in just a few minutes. So what our platform does, it helps you easily launch and create different types of fundraising initiatives and fundraising campaigns. One of them that you've seen already so far that's using our platform is Maternal Health Matters, the Motherhood Collective. So this is their CosVox campaign site that they created. They were able to use the template, and with no coding required, with no additional staff, no IT person, no web developer, they were able to just go in here, point and click, easily brand it and make it their own by changing the colors, putting in their logo, putting in their video or a photo, and then share this with their networks in order to get them engaged in the fundraising campaign. So one of the things that we focus on in CosVox is that storytelling aspect of online fundraising. And what that really boils down to on a technical side is the ability for you to tell your story in a way that you want to tell it. So not only helping you to easily design the look and feel of CosVox through our online software, you can easily change your site settings so you can run your fundraising site and tell your story however way that you want to. One of the great features that everybody should use when it comes to online fundraising is what we call an impact metric. So this is a metric that instead of just talking about funds being raised, even though funds being raised is the whole point of a fundraising campaign, what really matters to donors is about the impact that you can create through the impact that they can create through the fundraising campaign. So instead of just counting the amount of donations being raised, we have an impact metric counter here that the Motherhood Collective is using to display the number of women being helped, because that's, at the end of the day, that's the impact that they want to create. So that's one of the things that you think about when you plug in into your fundraising campaign. On CauseVox, everything is geared towards that storytelling aspect of helping you get more reach. So when you design your CauseVox campaign sites for your fundraising campaign, you can easily put in photos, put in quotes, tell stories, put in videos, basically to use this as a narrative so people can really get involved in the story of the fundraising campaign. But the story just doesn't end there. As you're running your fundraising campaign, one of the things that you should be doing as well is to post impact stories as well as to post updates, just as Noah said. So for example, over here, as the Motherhood Collective is running this campaign, instead of just having a page and a site with the donate button, which is very transactional focused, they focus really on the people. They focus on sharing imagery of their supporters, about the people that they're helping, as well as giving their network updates on how the fundraising campaign is doing. So this is just a story that they posted, and it's a thank you. And you'll notice here that there's no specific call to action for their network to take action. And that's one of the great things about how CauseVox is set up. Because when you set up your CauseVox campaign, you have these implicit CTA buttons up top over here, such as donate, join the campaign, or to share, without you having to always ask your supporters to make a donation, to make a donation, to make a donation. The idea here is that as you post stories to your campaign site on our platform, then the more traffic and donations you'll get. And because of that, it's really easy for people to take action up top over here. So that's just one example. Another big example too, one of the techniques that Noah mentioned was around the fundraisers. So you notice here that there's a participants listing. So in order to really extend your reach, when you run a fundraising campaign, sometimes you have to use somebody else's reach, somebody else's audience. A lot of times when you're a small organization, a small fundraising team, you may not have a big email list or a big social media list, or if you already have one, you've been leveraging them for fundraising for quite a while. So the idea is that, like, how can you generate the most amount of reach in new audiences without having to go buy a list, without having to go put out ads? The best way to do it is through peer-to-peer fundraising. So you notice here that these are all individual supporters. These are all individuals that are part of the Motherhood Collective, either as a volunteer or a board member or just someone who really loves the organization and is advocating for them. And they were able to go in here and create a personal fundraising page. So Trish over here, within 3 steps, she was able to put in her photo, put in her name, set a goal, put in her fundraising appeal, and then send it out to her networks and her friends and family to raise more awareness about the campaign, as well as to generate new donations and new donors to her page. All the donations that are generated on her page don't go directly to her. It's counted on her page, but all the funds actually go directly to the nonprofit for accountability purposes. So that's a great way just to increase your reach. One of the things that we've seen is that the campaigns that use this way of fundraising, that use peer-to-peer fundraising on our platform, they tend to raise twice as much as the campaigns that just do regular crowdfunding on our platform. Another example that I want to show you is the Just Water movement. The main thing I want to show you here is that the design of the page, the look of it is completely different, and that's because they were able to go into CauseVox and easily design it. So jumping into that, this is the CauseVox admin side, kind of like the side that you'll see when you want to set up your campaign. As a small nonprofit, as a small fundraising team, and especially as first-time online fundraisers, peer-to-peer or crowdfunding, setting something up can be a little scary. So what we boiled it down into CauseVox is the administrative interface that's super easy to use, it's point and click, and it functions similar to Facebook. So when you first log in, you see a dashboard of your activity, of what's going on in your fundraising campaign. But then we built our platforms so that you can easily design and set up your fundraising campaign for the first time. For example, let's say you want to upload a logo or change colors. You can easily go into here. You can upload an image by finding the right thing that you want to upload, or the right image. So let's say there's an image here that I want. You can easily upload that. Or let's say you want to change the colors in CauseVox, then you can easily go in and change the header backgrounds very easily as well. Changes to a white, for example. So you can make edits into Cosmos very easily, and does the same thing with uploading text as well. Instead of having to code something up, you can easily just upload an image into our platform over here. You can resize it without needing to know how to code, and you can make it your own. So easy to design. On Cosmos as well, we give you a lot of options for your personal fundraisers. So let's say somebody's fundraising for you. What they can easily do is they can go into your Cosmos campaign site, click on create a fundraising page over here, and then within a few steps, they can easily set up their page. And one of the questions that was asked before is around peer-to-peer fundraising for an audience that may not be tech savvy. Well, we designed Cosmos to be not only mobile friendly on any device, but then you can easily design your campaign site without having to know how to code. So everything is very guided. So let's say you have a board member who's fundraising for you for a personal fundraising page. They can easily go through a quick wizard on getting set up without having to think too much about kind of what each part is about. They can have a lot of templates that they can use, and they can easily get set up with guided sharing. So it doesn't require you to develop specific instructions. They can just follow the on-screen tips. After this, someone's page is complete, and they can just start fundraising for you. So, and that's all it takes. So again, at Cosmos, what we focus on is online fundraising. You can use our platform for different types of fundraising campaigns, crowdfunding campaigns, peer-to-peer fund campaigns, Giving Tuesday, recurring gift campaigns, and our pricing can also be found on cosvox.com under our pricing tab. Now, if you do have any other questions on how Cosvox works, or if you want to schedule a one-on-one demo with a more in-depth review of how you can do fundraising on Cosvox without expanding your team, without expanding your budgets, then feel free to reach out to us, cosvox.com, and then you can request a demo by going into this request demo button over here. At this time, we'll be happy to take any other questions that you have on Cosvox or on online fundraising. And I'll just hand it over to Noah to lead that section right now.
Thanks, Rob. And like Rob said, we really design these tools to be an asset to you and your teams to actually streamline your workflow so that you can spend more time on promotion of your campaign and spend more time on building relationships. And so a lot of the functionality and we've designed it so that it's really easy and simple to use and provides a delightful experience for both you and your supporters. And like Rob said, if you're interested in seeing it more up close and spending a little bit more time digging into really understanding how your organization could leverage Cosvox to do online fundraising, you can request a demo with Rob or myself directly on our website, and we'll schedule a one-on-one time to review that with you. Well, and I appreciate everyone who kind of stuck around with us. If you have any further questions, you can email me at noah@cosvox.com, or you can email Rob directly at rob@cosvox.com. Again, thank you guys so much for dedicating time. I know how important time is in a fundraiser schedule, so we're so grateful that you invested it with us, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.